Black Lives Matter is still in the news. Today, of course, is the anniversary of the George Floyd death. We just talked about that in the last segment, and we were sort of transitioning into a conversation about BLM and what are they doing? What do they want in this country? And are they being effective in their quest for justice reform? I think the answer is no. I think it's actually been a large failure for the justice reform movement in its entirety because we had a lot of momentum. We wanted some real meaningful change. A year has gone by and nothing has been accomplished. Now, the Democrats themselves, who have typically been in alignment with BLM, we're starting to see this rift develop. BLM now unhappy with what they're seeing from the Democrats, which were the same people that promised them everything this last election. This article comes over from Business Insider, written by Camilla DeChalis. It says, inside the police reform rift between BLM activists and the Democrats, 1 year after protests engulfed the nation. Police reform once brought in a beautiful harmony the Democratic lawmakers and the BLM activists together. Now they're pushing to pass a bipartisan bill. They've left out attempts to lobby lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. All right, so I want to go through this briefly just to frame out a little bit about sort of the evolution of this back and forth. So we know that BLM has been active in trying to get some real legislation passed. We know that the Democrats promised them the world that they were going to be involved and do all of this. But let's take a look at really how this is unfolding behind the scenes. Democratic lawmakers and BLM activists marched together last summer in the aftermath of the Floyd killing. That scene symbolized unity between the two sides. But a year later, activists who propelled the issue of police reform find themselves sidelined. Some BLM activists say that the White House and lawmakers within Congress have continued to shut them out of these negotiations. You don't say. Crime Bill Joe Biden and top cop Kamala Harris don't want to hear from BLM? No kidding. The movement from Black Lives, a coalition of several organizations that advocates the rights of Black Americans, is one of many groups that have tried to reach out to lawmakers to hold conversations, but their calls have gone unanswered. A policy and research coordinator for the organization said. Political backlash. And where is this coming from? Could it have anything to do with defund the police? Leading the efforts to get a congressional police reform measure, we have two Democrats, Karen Bass of California and Cory Booker of New Jersey. Tim Scott, a South Carolina Republican, is also in the fray. The group acknowledged that they will not make the May 25th deadline, which was today. They need help to succeed. They need 50 Democrats and at least 10 Republicans to get the 60 vote threshold. Now, of course, that is true, right? Because you need a more than a simple majority if it is a non-financial bill. But of course, Joe Biden could defund the police with the stroke of a pen, or they could make this a financial bill. They could make this a budgetary bill, and then they only need a simple majority. So they could just sort of start defunding different states. They could use the power of the purse, which is within the purview of the House of Representatives, to control the budgets of different states and just say, hey, if you don't, reduce your police force by 25%, we're going to pull back this federal funding. That happened like that, no problem. And they have all of the House of Representatives that they need to do that. So what they're going to be doing now for the foreseeable future is blaming the Republicans. Well, they're not coming across the aisle. We have 51 Democrats, but we need 9 Republicans, and they're not going to cross because of that damn qualified immunity thing. All right, Democrats, then table that. Table the qualified immunity. Let's get everything else that you've promised. And look, I don't even agree with all the solutions. I just say if you promise this stuff, get it through. Okay. And if you're going to be bloviating about this and justice reform all the time on all, and be parading Floyd's family around all over the place, well, let's see some action from you, shall we? We'll see if they do it. So they're going to be blaming the Republicans for the foreseeable future, even though they have other mechanisms by which they could get something done. During a CNN interview, James Clyburn, a Democrat for South Carolina who's been an ardent supporter for police reform, suggested that the final bipartisan measure did not have to include reforms on qualified immunity. We know what that is. Other elements in the bill are being debated, like the federal banning of chokeholds, requiring police officers to wear body cameras. So chokeholds, I disagree with. I think chokeholds absolutely have to be necessary. If you don't have a chokehold, folks, if you've never wrestled or done mixed martial arts, if you can't subdue somebody with the chokehold, the only other alternative is to basically kill them. Hit them in the head, knock them unconscious, cause a concussion, cause a laceration, cause a brain bleed, or shoot them or tase them or something like that, right? A chokehold, if done appropriately, perfectly safe and acceptable. The response to that would be, let's not have cops use less than lethal force and require them to use a gun. Let's just train them how to use the less than lethal force better. Many activists fear that, on body cameras though, absolutely, that should be without question. Many activists fear that the bill lawmakers are considering is watered down, not a true reflection of what activists want. They say it's been a missed opportunity on the part of folks in the government to not engage very deeply at the grassroots level, said Maurice Mitchell. Clyburn said that he did not know exactly whom Bass has been consulting with on this measure outside of congressional lawmakers, but said she and others should talk with everybody who has knowledge about the subject. The White House, as well as Bass, Scott, and Booker, did not respond to the request for a comment. So you're seeing a lot of the BLM people sort of being kicked out of the conversation, and really for good reason. I mean, truthfully, what BLM wants is insane. Here is a list of demands from their website. So they want to convict and ban Donald Trump from political future. So you have a couple people who are on board with this idea. You got Rep. Ilhan Omar, Presley, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, that they're all for this. So they want to convict and ban Donald Trump. So if you're sort of a mainstream Democrat and you're going, well, we can't do that. Okay, we tried to convict him in the House of Representatives. We got that done. We tried to convict him in the Senate. We didn't convict him. We impeached him. Basically, we indicted him in the House, but we couldn't convict him in the Senate. We tried twice. Can't do it. So do you have any other demands? What else do you want from us, folks? We can't do this. So stop asking. Number two, though, maybe they want to talk about justice reform. So the first one had to do with Trump. Maybe number two will have to do with justice. Oh no, it says expel Republican members of Congress. Okay, so nothing to do with law enforcement, nothing to do with anything other than a white supremacist attack on the insurrection. So BLM, if it's a justice reform organization, they're 0 for 2. Then we have launch a full investigation into the ties between white supremacy and the Capitol Police and law enforcement and the military. So it sounds like they want to sort of fund the police to do an investigation, like law enforcement officials to go in and investigate what happened there. So this is also a refund the police type of idea here. So they're 0 for 3 now on justice reform. Then they want to permanently ban Trump from all digital media platforms. So how are they going to do that? Do they have a phone call into Zuckerberg and Dorsey and all of those other people? So we're 0 for 4 now. Defund the police. There it is. So when we finally get to something that relates to justice reform, they just want to go ahead and just defund them. Defund the entire police. We don't want any more of them at all. So if you're a Democratic lawmaker and you're trying to negotiate in this country about a reasonable justice reform solution, what are you supposed to do with that? Why would you even invite them to the table? You can't, because it's ridiculous. Don't let the coup be used as an excuse to crack down on our movement. So I don't even know what they want. Like, I don't know how you deliver that. Like, do we deliver one promise of no coup? All right. And then they want to pass the Breathe Act. So not even talking about the George Floyd Act. They're talking about the Breathe Act. Police were born out of slave patrols, they say. We cannot reform an institution built upon white supremacy. The Breathe Act wants racial equity screens in federal programs. We want environmental justice at historic levels, engaging with system-impacted communities, health justice, education justice, housing justice, and environmental justice. So nothing at all other than defunding the police to do with justice. I'm sorry, criminal justice, which is what we were talking about with George Floyd. And police, that was criminal justice. That was not environmental justice. Now, the New York Times, for some reason, is confused as to why people are sort of tired of BLM. How could that be? What's the problem? What's going on here? And this story comes over from redstate.com, which is a red blog written over by Nick Arama. It says the New York Times has an opinion piece out. It says support for Black Lives Matter surged last year. Did it last? They say they note how immediately after the death of George Floyd, that support for BLM surged. But then, as we noticed here, after June 3rd, it took a precipitous drop. As the summer went on, it went down even further than before. The article said that among some voters, even Republicans, it turned out into outright opposition. Damn it, BLM. Damn it. See what we told you? The article suggests this drop is evidence of support from white people and Republicans being fickle. They never seem to figure out why it took such a drop after June 3rd, just suggesting that people don't like it when protesters seek a redress of grievances, or implying that Republicans and non-supportive voters have issues with civil rights. Right? Do you think it's that? If you're listening and you're sort of not a fan of BLM, is it because you have a problem with civil rights? You got an issue with that? Do you have a problem when people redress their grievances with their government? Is that offensive to you? Me neither. Nobody cares about those things. The New York Times opinion piece says after Floyd's death, Republicans reported much stronger support for BLM than they had earlier in 2020. But perhaps more striking is the rapid decline. And look at these numbers. Net support versus January 1, 2020. So we see something happen right here. What's going on here? I don't know what that is. But we see Democrats maintain support. All voters are just trending off, going down. Republicans, just a rapid drop off. Just, nope, that's enough. Nope, we've had enough. Thanks for playing. Up until this moment, even the Republicans, what they saw on that video, they said, all right, this is insane. We want to address this issue. Then something happened. Nope, we're up. Thanks for playing. Not around anymore. Wonder why they didn't show this graph from the same article. Hispanic or Latino, we have a new addition. That's also dropping off. Oh, and we also have this one from the African American community, also dropping off. And we have other also dropping off. They're all going down. Okay, it's not just Republicans. It's all demographics, all ethnicities. Everybody is bailing ship, abandoning ship. What they completely leave out and never mention is the riots, the assaults, the killings, the destruction that occurred over the past year in connection with the protests. You think that might have had a little bit to do with the drop after June 3rd? How do you write about the decline and never touch upon that? Then came the radical calls to defund the police, which virtually no one but Democrats supported. When the decline showed that, yes, BLM, Black Lives Matter to people, which was why there was a brief moment of unity. But then people of all stripes rejected the violence and the radical nature of BLM. Okay, so you have small letter BLM and you have capital letter BLM. One says, yes, Black Lives Matter, of course. The other is this neo-Marxist anti-justice movement that just enriches their founders with new houses. But of course, the New York Times wanted to suggest it was uncaring white people and Republicans without leaving out all the destruction. The article notes that white Democrats were still supporting BLM, which they take as a positive movement. So they're basically confirming the Democrats are ignorant, is what he said. Or went on, or they're cool with the destruction if they agree with the radical nature. It said it's true. Democrats like Biden and Kamala embraced BLM. Kamala even donated to a bail fund during the riots. Remember that? She posted that up same day in Minneapolis after they torched the 3rd police precinct there, burnt it to the ground. She's up on Twitter. Kamala Harris on Twitter. Hey, anybody who is arrested there, just go to this website and you can support their bail fund. So that's nice that she really supports justice out there. Does she support bail reform? Wonder if she donated any money to those Capitol Hill rioters or not. Guessing not. New York Times doesn't believe that the opposition to BLM is likely to reverse anytime soon. Right, of course not. So on Twitter, somebody said, I wonder maybe this could be what caused it. Could it be pictures like this? Torching an Arby's? Is this justice? Maybe that might be why those numbers drop off, because people are tired of seeing their neighborhoods torched. It's not okay. People don't want to see cops killing people. They also don't want to see their neighborhoods torched. So if they want to work on their public image, a little bit of a suggestion to stop torching neighborhoods might be a good idea. Now, you know, the problem might be more fundamental than this. It might be something that starts at the top. You know, they say leadership starts at the top. You sort of set the culture at the top, and you want those people to be very strong natured, very powerful people who are going to move the needle on whatever you're working on. And the BLM the BLM founder actually says that police are a terrorist organization. So says she always wanted to fight them. So the remarks came over from a speech at King's College in London, part of a Ferguson Solidarity Tour. Cullors, who is the BLM founder, reveals that her activism is rooted in a lifelong desire to, quote, fight the police, conflates the group to a terrorist organization. And I'm a criminal defense lawyer, okay? My job is to go and sort of work against the police. So I've got, sort of spring-loaded to say that there are problems with the police. I would never call them a terrorist organization. What? What? A terrorist organization? I joined when I was 17, she said. I remember the first thing I said, do you fight the police? That's what I wanted to do. I always knew I wanted to fight police. They were the single most sort of terrorist organization in my life, and I wanted to know how to fight them. I am a person who fights the police, but I do not consider them a terrorist organization. I consider them to be a legitimate function of society. They need to be counterbalanced properly by a strong defense. We have the scales of justice. But I don't, when I walk into court and there's a police officer on the stand, I don't think that that's Al-Qaeda going to blow up the building. It's just a police officer. He's doing his job. And 99% of them are great people. So I started doing work when I was 17 years old against the police, she adds, before detailing how she ran campaigns that focused on trying to get them out of high schools. Ran campaigns that focused on decriminalizing young people's lives. So I can get behind that. That's fine. Cullors also conflates police to terrorists when describing the motives of BLM, alleging her group seeks to combat the impact that racism, that terrorism, and I say terrorism, I'm talking about the police, has on our lives. So, this is just this is just a quick point here, but it's like, how do you engage in a real dialogue with this person? How do you have a conversation if this is how this person thinks? And doesn't just like, this is not a new position. This person has been thinking this since she was 17 years old. Her entire framework for how law enforcement works in America is sort of a victim population versus a terrorist organization. And she's confirmed that twice now, 2 sentences. Actually, three times in 2 sentences, twice in the same sentence. So if you're on the side of let's have a reasonable conversation about law enforcement in America, and you're trying to have on the other side of the table a conversation with somebody that says the police are actual terrorists, what do you do? Do you have that conversation? No, you get up and leave. You just say, we're done. We're done here. Go ahead, continue your work on fighting terrorism in America. And I'll do my work. Thanks for playing. I'm out. During the event, which was hosted by student groups including Action Palestine, the Intersectional Feminist Society, the African Caribbean Society, and the King's Ethnic Minority Association. Oh my gosh. That is just one of the most perfect sentences I've ever read on this show. We have Action Palestine. We have the Intersectional Feminist Society. We have the African Caribbean Society. Then we have the King's Ethnic Minority Association, along with Black Lives Matter. Oh my goodness. In response to the Ferguson riots, Cullors recounted how it prompted many of us to go back into our own neighborhoods and shut shit down, she said. One of the biggest things I learned about Ferguson is it does not take 2,000 people to shut stuff down. 5 people can shut a freeway down. We did it in LA. 10 people can shut a Walmart down. We did it in Ferguson. She also talks about occupying the LAPD headquarters. She said, we've been shutting S down since August 9th. We're still shutting it down. In LA, for example, we occupied Los Angeles Police Headquarters for 18 days. They occupied the Los Angeles Police Headquarters 18 days. Was that an insurrection? Did I miss that one? Because it sounds like they're interfering with formal government operations. I mean, the police are an extension of the government. It's a government entity. And they're interfering with, they occupied the headquarters for 18 days. Did you hear about this? I didn't hear about this. I wonder where all the impeachment articles are. Are they being drafted by Nancy Pelosi and her crew? Doubtful. This unearthed video that follows, we're going to play this next, shows Cullors relishing people comparing her work for its similarities to former Chinese Communist Party Mao Zedong, his little red books in a 2010 speech. Quote, I was speaking to this young person from Arizona who's trying to fight SB 1070, which was that immigration bill we had here. And he grabbed a book and he said, it's like Mao's red book. And I was like, man, that's what I was thinking. And it was just really cool to hear him make that connection. And I was like, how about you buy 10 to 15 of these books and you'll have all like a youth organizing group where you talk about it and you really try to engage this. The BLM co-founder commented. Here she is.
I joined the organization when I was 17 years old. And I remember the first thing I said to the organization was, do you fight police? That's what I wanted to do. I always knew I wanted to fight the police. They were the single most sort of terrorist organization in my life, and I wanted to know how to fight them. I wanted to know how to hold them accountable. So I started doing work when I was 17 years old against the police, and from there, did different sorts of things. Ran campaigns that focused on trying to get them out of high schools. Ran campaigns that focused on decriminalizing young people's lives.
All take a look up here. You can see this says no more deaths up here, no more cover-ups, no more something. So we have all of the organizations. We have the Action Palestine. We saw those all listed there. So got a nice little setup here. I mean, this is a big production. They're going to be recording this and making a documentary out of it or something. So, all right, let's take some questions over from watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We got Joe Snow first up, says, blaming Republicans? Now, that's a novel idea. Yeah, they are definitely doing that. Going to milk that one for a while. NY Renal MD says, I think qualified immunity needs an overhaul. We have legal tests for causes of action, slander, libel. Make a legal test so it's at least possible to file a lawsuit. I agree. So I actually agree with that. I think that qualified immunity absolutely does need to be addressed. My only sort of rub here is that if we're going to make that the basis or the crux of an entire criminal justice bill, there's still a lot of other things we can do. So it's all right. If the whole thing is going to fail, meaning we just had one of the most monumental criminal justice cases that we may have in our lifetimes. I mean, truthfully, what happened with George Floyd and the response there, it's kind of a once in a century thing, right? I mean, have we ever had anything like that before? Not quite to that extent. We've had Rodney King, we had OJ, of course, we've had the Zimmermans and all of those, but not quite anything, I think, at this scale. So something like this happens and we have all of the momentum to pass something meaningful, and we're just going to stop because qualified immunity? That's it? You got the basis, or at least a good argument for the basis as to why the Democrats got elected in the first place was because it was sort of in the throes of all this social unrest and racial impropriety or disparities that are happening around the country. So if the Democrats now take control of the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, and they don't get anything done, and they just go, oh, well, those Republicans, we wanted qualified immunity in there, but they wouldn't give it to us. So we're going to blame them for stalling the entire package. It's their fault. Give me a break. So you just say, all right, well, we're going to give that up. We're going to pass all of this other stuff, the stuff that we have been promising to our constituents for a long time. We'll see if that happens, though. I'm not holding my breath. Renal says, think there is public support for some of the qualified immunity reform. Democrats are likely riding on the controversy. Yeah, peace, tranquility is not the environment where they thrive politically. Right. Exactly right. This is a great point. So what happens if the Democrats pass all of this stuff? And what happens if something else happens down the road? What are they going to complain about? What are they going to be able to do? Because if the Democrats pass something here, then they're going to own it for the foreseeable future. So they kind of really don't have much interest in that, because if they solve this issue, well, they deflate a lot of the momentum in the sales that's behind them at the current moment. I know that's very cynical, but I think it's true. Chokeholds matter. Working security in downtown Chicago to help pay for school. Chokeholds help me keep peace on more than a dozen occasions. Yeah, that comes from It's Ed. He's right. Right? It is right. So chokeholds are important. I mean, the other thing you can do is just bash somebody over the head or shoot them, I guess. We have Joe Snow says, you must have never had to tell a cop no. Don't know what that is in reference to. I mean, I've told cops no a lot, but in the context of the law, I can't say that I've ever been pulled over and a cop gave me an order and I said no. But of course, I would not have a problem with that if it was an unlawful order. But I know that other people may not have that same perspective, right? And so that's why we're going to be talking about how to talk to cops on Saturday, June 12th. If you're a subscriber at watchingthewatchers.locals.com, you're going to get to be a part of that. And then Joe Snow, we're going to talk about how to talk to the cops. Sharon Quidney says they are not interested in a conversation. All they are interested in is replacing the Constitution, which they advertise as racist, with a totalitarian Marxist dictatorship. I think you're on the right track there, Sharon. Jeremy says anyone with half a brain can define the verb to police. Even if you define one who enforces law is not a terrorist by definition. Ignorance of reality only makes one appear crazy. These people are claiming to be combating terrorism, but are terrorists themselves by definition. Ooh, that's good. I like that, Jeremy. Well done. We have another one from Joe Snow says, to be honest, I don't entirely disagree that today's police absolutely terrorize people for sport. I don't consider them a terrorist organization, but many individual officers are terrorists because they truly are some of the most disgusting sociopaths walking among us. I've dealt with many cops growing up. One or two were decent people. One was stellar. All the rest were absolutely predators who take joy in ruining lives. It's an interesting perspective. And, to be fair to that point, right, there are officers who do terrorize people. There's no question about that. I think some of it is is justified. Okay, if you're sort of in a situation where allegedly you're breaking the law and you need somebody to say you're breaking the law, so there's a boundary that's being crossed. Anytime you cross any boundary, you're going to have some friction there, and especially when you're talking about laws in society, you're sort of breaching something. You're going to have police. When you meet in the middle there, it's going to be contentious. And if you're not somebody that's familiar with dealing with police, yeah, it's going to feel like you're being terrorized. And some of those situations, even though that the person, sort of the defendant or the person who's being charged with the crime, even though they may feel subjectively terrorized, that feeling alone does not make what the police did unreasonable or unlawful or even wrong in any capacity. As long as they're following the rules, as long as they're following the laws, the fact that somebody feels terrorized, that's part of the deal. Okay, that's just part of society. Now, there are other situations, of course, and I've dealt with many of them, where the police have no lawful authority or are exceeding their lawful authority, and they're becoming inhumane to certain people outside of the context of what should be allowed. And I think that in those cases, of course, those are those bad cops I talk about. And I'm very upset with those cops. I started an entire YouTube channel about it. And I like to call those officers out and make sure that they're held accountable. But just because that there is, one bucket of those people, it doesn't necessarily mean that all the officers are bad. I think that, there's sort of a cultural problem with law enforcement where a lot of the good officers are not encouraged or given a forum where they can speak up and call out some of the problems that they see. And so when I talk about law enforcement in that context, I think that there is a cultural problem that permeates the entire sector. That being said, I still believe that within that shell, that most of the officers in there, at least in my experience, I've dealt with many of them, I think that they're mostly good people, not generally friendly. Okay. They don't typically like to see me. We don't go out and shake hands and say hi, but reasonable people that I can tell are doing their best, doing a job. They've got other things going on in their lives, just like you do, just like I do. And they're just trying to do a good job. And, they don't necessarily like to go in and sort of get beat up by a defense attorney. And we don't like to do that either. So it's just one of the things that, we're all human beings. We have all sorts of different permutations about what makes us human. And we're trying to negotiate and reach a consensus in the middle that is reasonable. So when I think that when we go too far one direction either way, we can get a little bit blinded by our own cognitive biases. And I recognize that myself, I am generally on that side. I'm like over here going, these damn cops and these damn prosecutors, and I can recognize that in myself, but I also recognize that there's a bit of a blind spot. And so I try to kind of pull myself back in over here and be empathetic to police, many of whom I think are just trying to do their best out there. So thank you for the perspective, Joe Snow. Appreciate your comments.